The president-elect announced something that most NFL owners and the British government have been expecting for quite some time, that one of his biggest donors and the owner of the New York Jets, Woody Johnson, will be the next U.S. ambassador to Great Britain. And Vlad, as is tradition, Mr. Trump and his family will spend tonight at Blair House, across from the White House, before coming here for the swearing-in ceremony on the west front of the Capitol.
Major, is it unusual for an incoming administration to have staffers stay on board?
From the previous administration, it is somewhat unusual, and particularly among those that President-elect Trump, soon to be President Trump, has asked to stay on. And by that, one of them is Brett McGurk, who was an advisor on counterterrorism to George W. Bush, but significantly, one of the top advisors to President Obama on the campaign to defeat ISIS, something as a candidate Donald Trump was highly critical of. Well, he's been asked by the incoming Trump administration to stay on as an advisor on ISIS and that strategy to defeat the terror group for an undetermined amount of time. There is no sense from the transition how long they'll ask Brett McGurk to stay, but the fact that he's being asked to stay is not only about continuity, but perhaps a newfound appreciation Mr. Trump has for the ongoing campaign to defeat ISIS, which has been accelerated in the last couple of months, and if you listen to those at the Pentagon, achieved some very significant milestones in those intervening couple of months.
And Major, based on what you saw Thursday and the people that you've been talking to, what do you think we can expect to hear from the president-elect on Friday when he becomes President Trump?
So this speech, I think, is going to be very consistent with the major themes candidate Trump introduced to the country, which is capturing the idea of American renewal. What does this make America great again slogan really means? And I think he will simplify it into two main projects for his administration. Economic growth defined not just by a joblessness rate, which is at historically low standards now, but better jobs and high-paying jobs, particularly those in the manufacturing sector. A new approach to trade that is more skeptical of globalism generally and certainly more skeptical of multilateral trade deals. And also talking about security in a sense of defeating ISIS, but also creating for Americans a greater sense that they're not in jeopardy or in threat of either ISIS-inspired terrorism or terrorism of different kinds. Those are the two biggest agenda items for this incoming administration, and I'm told the rhetoric will not be, let us say, high-flying or particularly lyrical. It'll be much more straightforward, action-oriented, nonpartisan in many respects, and with a tinge of populism, seeking to bring change to Washington. All of that part and parcel of what I expect the nation will hear tomorrow here at the west front of the Capitol in the inaugural address.
And we'll certainly be watching. Before we let you go, Major, I guess you enjoyed CBSN After Dark so much, you decided to take the show on the road. You've got a new podcast. Tell us about that.
Well, it really is. I'm glad you mentioned CBSN because it really is inspired by everything we've done and tried to achieve on CBSN, creating a rapport with our audience that's a little bit less formal and a little bit longer form. And it was my idea after the campaign to put together a podcast. I've become a huge fan of that medium. I think most Americans are finding that a great way to absorb information at a time of their choosing and in a venue of their choosing. And the audio aspect of it really does create a sense of intimacy. So tomorrow morning, the Takeout podcast will debut. I'm the host of it. Steve Shigaris, our senior political editor, is one of my sidekicks. My producer, Arden Fari, is one of my sidekicks as well. We'll have lots of different guests. We'll talk about politics, of course, the Trump administration, which I'll cover on a day-to-day basis, but also culture, sports, pop culture, everything that interests, essentially, me. And our first guest, who you'll hear tomorrow when you find our podcast, was Corey Lewandowski, the very first campaign manager for Donald Trump. We talked a lot about the campaign, the incoming administration, but because we have a lot of topics we like to cover, we talked about a subject that I think is going to light up the internet to a certain degree, certainly in the New England area. Tom Brady, the quarterback of the New England Patriots, Donald Trump, their relationship, and golf. Let's take a listen.
Mr. Trump and Tom have developed a relationship over the years because they play golf together. And it's been an important thing for Mr. Trump to develop those relationships. And if you read, I think Golf Digest this week said that Donald Trump is going to be the greatest golfer as the president by far that the country's ever seen. Because he's been a great athlete. Donald Trump's been a great athlete his whole life. And that's what he loves. He loves the competition. He used to be a competitive tennis player. He used to be a basketball player. He used to be a baseball player. He loves the competition. And he will tell you, and if you could get Tom Brady, he would tell you this too, Tom Brady, for all of his athletic achievements, cannot beat Donald Trump at golf. That's a true story. Those are real friends.
So walk us through Like I said, it will light up the internet, at least in New England, possibly countrywide. The Takeout podcast debuts tomorrow. You can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.
Major, I love the fact that you guys will be at a restaurant every week. That's going to be great. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.